Welcome to our channel, Behind My Story. Please like, share, and subscribe.
Hi there. I'm Marco and I'm 21 years old. I was born and raised in one of the poorest neighborhoods in my city. I tried to find a decent hobby at a young age that might lead me into earning a living. I found my passion when I began working in the computer field. I fell in love with technology. Because of my intelligence, I became famous in a short span of time. I could identify computer problems and resolve them immediately. I became wealthy, but my greed couldn't be satisfied. I want to get richer quicker, so I became a hacker. I experimented and played around trying to crack various low-level security systems. Then one day, I decided it was my time to up my game by trying to hack into banks and websites. My first challenge in my new career was to hack into my local bank. Banks have strong computer security systems, but I was able to breach their security protocols and breach their security defenses. I honed my skills and developed a hacking program that could hack any website without leaving a trace of evidence. I hacked into the bank's funds and transferred a huge amount of money to my account. In the morning, the news announced that the bank had been hacked by an unknown person. There were no leads in this case. I wanted to boast to people that I was the hacker who had cracked that bank, but I was too smart to do that. My next challenge was to hack into my country's national banking system, a higher-level security system. It took me a couple of attempts, but I succeeded in the end by transferring a hefty sum of money into my account. The whole city was abuzz talking about the phantom hacker who was stealing money from banks with impunity and without leaving a clue. My third challenge was the Ministry of Finance. I tried to breach their website a few times, but I failed each time. After some investigation, I learned that they had a Russian security expert in charge of their security, and he was very good indeed. As a matter of pride, I took it upon myself to make beating him my personal goal in life, like an equal opponent in chess. We began playing our game. I would try to hack in, and he would block me. This back and forth game continued for a little while, until one day he sent me a message. "Got you!" Suddenly, my computer shut down. Soon afterwards, the police showed up at my door and arrested me. So here I sit in prison. But the chess game between myself and my Russian adversary is not over yet. I will finish my prison term and come back for a rematch someday. It's a matter of personal pride now.
A teacher earns the respect of his students and also serves as an exemplary role model. Unfortunately, student adoration of teachers is on the wane in society now. Students owe teachers some degree of loyalty for contributing to their success in life. But what if you discovered that your teacher was on the run from the law? How would you feel? Would you want to know? Lend an ear to my story. I am Erica, and I am 17 years old. I live with my parents and my sister Felicia. My lifelong dream was to excel in all areas of life. I did well in school, and my parents noticed my stellar intellect from an early age. So they encouraged and supported my education in every way. I loved and respected all the teachers who ever taught me. I respected them for their efforts, and I took a dim view of my fellow students who didn't respect them. I even respected the teachers who taught me unimportant subjects. Though I respected all my teachers, past and present, I hadn't yet found any worthy of being a good role model for me to follow until one day a new chemistry teacher, Mr. Franklin, came to our school when our previous teacher resigned to travel abroad with her family. From the very first moment when he first entered the classroom, I was charmed by his charisma. He seemed quiet, self-confident, and venerable. But it wasn't just me. All the students were impressed by his presence. His explanations were much clearer than our previous teachers. With every passing day, I loved him more and more. I had chosen a good role model. I was amazed by his resume qualifications and his erudition and experience. I liked to chat with him on breaks to benefit from his experience, wisdom, and insights. He never indicated that I was an annoyance to him. Instead, he welcomed all my questions openly and cheerfully and shared his knowledge freely. I didn't want to let him down, so I studied very hard. He was so worldly and street smart that we nicknamed him the Thug because he seemed to know exactly how the world operated and how to get around obstacles. We figured he was either an alien from space or a thug wanted by the law. Then one day while browsing the internet, I came upon a strange coincidence. I read about an intelligent serial killer who committed brutal crimes without leaving a trace. Some witnesses had seen him and described him to the police. The resultant face sketches looked exactly like Mr. Franklin, as if he had a twin brother. The first thought that came into my mind was that this was one weird coincidence. When I went to school the next day, I showed him the news article and the sketch of the serial killer. When he saw the sketch, his features darkened. He asked me where I had read this news, and I told him that it was from a news website. He agreed that the similarity between him and the sketch was uncanny, but he seemed unconcerned, disinterested even. I was wondering if Mr. Franklin were to be the killer, what his motivation for killing might be. The next few days strengthened my suspicions when I heard about a murder in our neighborhood, which coincided with a time when Mr. Franklin was not at school. When he subsequently returned to school, he looked worried and nervous. If he were the killer, why would he risk coming back to school? I then began to consider that he might be planning to kill me because I knew his dirty little secret. I had trouble for sleeping for the next few days. Then one day after visiting one of my friends, I was walking home when I sensed that someone was following me. I began walking more quickly, and the footsteps sped up proportionately. Suddenly, I felt a touch on my shoulder. I spun around to see Mr. Franklin. He gestured for me not to speak. I nodded okay. He then told me that he has a brother named Rodriguez, who was actually the serial killer that I had shown him in the news article. He said his brother followed him everywhere to torment him and cause trouble for him. He told me that he had to leave the city, and I was very sad to hear that. He hoped that we would meet again someday. After his disappearance from school, my mind was full of questions. Was he telling the truth? Was he truly innocent? I hope I find out the answers to my questions someday.
Love what you do until you can do what you love. This is a famous quote that inspires people to seek out their dream job. I heard that quote at school before I graduated and entered the working world. What's that, you ask? Was I successful in achieving my dream? Well, I came this close. Let me tell you about it. My name is Max and I'm 19 years old. Poverty and I are intimate friends and constant companions. I live in one of the poorest neighborhoods in my city. Most of the local citizens work at the seaport. The rest of us, we make a living by scavenging through and collecting rubbish. But I wasn't just an ordinary rubbish collector. No, sir, I was a specialist in that field, like my dad before me. Dad taught my brothers and me how to do it expertly. This is how it worked. Factories liked to use recycled materials to reduce the cost of buying new materials, so we would go to the city rubbish pile and separate out materials into different piles, such as plastics, glass bottles, milk cartons, tin cans, and so on. Then we would sell those materials to factories for reuse in making their products. This recycling process saved the factories a ton of money, but unfortunately, that didn't translate into a ton of money for us rubbish collectors. I had a dream one day of opening my own factory and just sitting back and watching the money flow in. When I told Dad that, he told me that good fortune only happens for a select few people. After hearing those words, I went to bed and dreamed about my future factory. Little did I suspect that my dream might actually come true someday. One day after working late collecting rubbish, while on the way home, I suddenly heard voices coming from a large rubbish pile in front of my home. It seemed that people were using that pile as a place of business to sell drugs and booze. An argument was brewing between two groups. Each group were wielding sticks and knives as makeshift weapons. One guy in Group A had a gun and shot someone in Group B, so someone in Group B stabbed gun guy in Group A. After that, a full-on fight ensued, with everyone in both groups joining in the fray. Within minutes, I heard approaching police sirens, which caused the fight to break up and both groups to run away, leaving the bleeding gun guy lying on the sidewalk. I tried to help him by staunching his bleeding. As I was doing so, I noticed a lottery ticket beside him with a letter saying that it was the winning ticket for $1 million payout. I froze. I looked around. No one was watching, so I acted, somewhat ignobly. Then I left quickly. If the police were to arrive and find me with the bleeding man, they might think that I had done it. I rushed home and fell into an easy chair, taking a deep breath of relief. While I was telling Dad about what had happened, there was a knock on the door. It was the Group A and B gangs. The spokesperson for the two groups held a knife in my direction and said, "Hand over the lottery ticket or die where you stand." Needless to say, I handed it over post-haste. But then he said, "I'm sorry. You've seen too much. You have to die." I pleaded, "But I didn't see anything, I swear." Suddenly, there was a flash from a camera, and the whole group of thugs began laughing. "You've been pranked," Dad said, as he stepped out from the crowd. My brothers were behind him laughing too. "You've been pranked," Dad said, as he stepped out from the crowd. My brothers were behind him laughing too. While relieved that my imminent death had been postponed, I was deeply saddened that I had lost my $1 million chance to get my dream factory. What rubbish.